Hey everyone, welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we're going to be looking at Christ as being our high priest. And this is going to be from Hebrews 4:14 through Hebrews 5:10 that covers this whole section. So we'll read through this real quick and then we'll look at some of the notes. So the author starts with verse 14. It says, "So then, since we have a great high priest who has entered heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weakness, and for he faced all the same testings we did, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it most." Sorry, messed up with that one. Every high priest is a man chosen to represent other people in their dealings with God. He presented their gifts to God and offered sacrifices for their sins, and he is able to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward people because he himself is subject to the same weakness. That is why he must offer sacrifices for his own sins as well as theirs. And no one can become a high priest simply because he wants such an honor. He must be called by God for this work, just as Aaron was. This is why Christ did not honor himself by assuming he could become high priest. No, he was chosen by God, who said to him, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." And in another passage, God said to him, "You are a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." While Jesus was here on earth, he offered prayers and pleadings with a loud cry and tears to the one who could rescue him from death, and God heard his prayers because of his deep reverence for God. Even though Jesus was God's son, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. In this way, God qualified him as a perfect high priest, and he became the source of eternal salvation. Excuse me. For all those who obey him, and God designated him to be a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. And so, what we see here, right, is these verses, right, effectively summarize the whole message and challenge of Hebrews. The high priesthood of Jesus, the Son of God, is the basis for endurance in the Christian faith. And so, a great high priest, right, Israel's high priest was the main leader in the worship of God and the primary mediator between God and the people. The way that this worked, the high priest was the one who offered the sacrifices for the people and was the mediator between the people and God. And so our high priest understands our weakness. Christ understands our weakness, our human pull towards sin, because he faced all the same temptations we did. He was tempted with all the essential aspects of sin, such as lust, greed, unforgiveness, and dishonesty, right? And so this makes him compassionate as a high priest. He understands what we went through. He can relate to us in that sense because he knows he was tempted, but he did not sin, and that's what the author hits on here. He did not sin, and so unlike the earthly high priest who had to make offerings for their own sins before they could make offerings for the people, right? Every high priest, right, had to do that, and so this phrase introduces requirements for high priests in general. Every high priest had to be a man, right? The high priest was one of the people, and so Jesus had to become human. That's in order for Jesus to be our high priest, he had to become human. He couldn't do that without being human. And so the second requirement for the high priest is that they would represent other people by offering sacrifices on their behalf, and he was the sacrifice. So only the high priest could offer the sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. There was a Day of Atonement that happened every single day, or I'm sorry, every single year, where the high priest would go in and offer a large sacrifice for the atonement of all the people. And so the high priest was only able to deal gently with those who sinned because he himself subject to the same sin weakness. And so he highlights that and says, "Hey, this is the person who you know is there for us. Understands our weakness, understands who we are, and the things that we deal with." And so the high priest was able to to relate to that and be part of that. And so he also talks about there being a loud cry from Christ, and most scholars, a lot of scholars believe that this is an allusion or a parallel or a reference to Christ's suffering in the garden at Gethsemane before his crucifixion. But the idea is that God hears his prayers in the sense of affirming his righteousness and suitability for his role as the priest. And so Jesus's faithful devotion is being presented here as an example for the readers, right? Because he learned obedience from the things he suffered, and that's kind of sometimes we have to learn that way as well. But Jesus was not disobedient before his suffering. So that's the difference. We have to make sure we understand that. But he walked the path of human experience. He understood human suffering. He understood the human experience all the way to his death on the cross. And so he understood all of that. And so, and he did this in complete submission to the Father's will. And so we are expected to travel the same path. We're not going to do it perfectly. We understand that. And so, but that's what made God, or that's how God qualified him as the a perfect high priest, you know, that he used there. And the word, in the Hebrew word used here, or as used in Hebrews, I'm sorry, used here means complete or mature. But basically, he completed this. There's no more need for high priest. He was the end all, right? We have the high priest, and he was the end all for high priest. And so Jesus, through his suffering, was qualified to be the source of our eternal salvation for all those who obey him. And so that's kind of what the Hebrew author is paralleling here, and saying in all this is they understood what the high priest's role was. And so this author is saying, okay, Christ is our high priest now. He was the one who went in, and yet he was a perfect high priest because he hadn't had to sin, so he didn't have to offer sacrifices for his sin. He took on the sacrifice and took on the sins of the whole world. And so that made him the perfect sacrifice. And so, as the high priest with that perfect sacrifice, there's no more need for sacrifices. There's no more need for high priests. He's the end all for that. And we're going to see that as we go in. I believe it's around chapter 10 or so that we hit that again, that the author of Hebrews emphasizes this again. So, as always, I hope that you're learning from these, and that you catch things and see things that you maybe hadn't seen before, as we go through them. If you have any questions, comments, please put them in the comment sections and stuff like that, or reach out to us directly, and we'll do our best to answer them. But as always, encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. That way you can continue to follow along with us. And as always, I appreciate everyone who takes time to watch these, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.